I'm home. All the time. We finally really did it. You maniacs! You blew it up! Oh, damn you! God damn you all to hell!
That monologue, for those who don't recognize it, and don't mind me spoiling a nearly 50-year-old movie, is from the late Charlton Heston, as astronaut Charles Taylor. Taylor has just discovered the planet on which he crashed, with hyper-intelligent militarized apes that have enslaved humans, is in fact his homeworld, Earth, sometime far in the future from his departure point. This is revealed to him when he finds the remains of the Statue of Liberty collapsed and partially buried in the sand. It, like Hitchcock's Psycho shower scene, or anything involving Marlon Brando and The Godfather, is so frequently parodied that people who've never seen those movies know those scenes. The Planet of the Apes finale, though, is the one that bothers me the most. On election night, as I watched the numbers click over and saw Trump take the Electoral College, I literally thought of Taylor kneeling in the surf, cursing mankind. Had people really chosen this bloated orange clown to be their president? Well, not really. Hillary still kicked his ass in raw votes, but the Electoral College, which coincidentally with his Broadside, had to be altered to accommodate the rise of political parties, gave the job to Trump. And it's been nothing but a nightmarish shit show since. There was no end of digital ink spilled analyzing how someone so grossly unqualified to even be a human could have reached that position. How any reasonable person could have voted for him. Him! From among over a dozen Republican candidates. We heard about the Rust Belt being ignored, and the rah-rah America First, and all the other empty-headed shit he said, and how it, quote, resonated with the working-class people. As a working-class people? I mean, it's in my fucking handle, for Christ's sake. I didn't see shit that he said he was going to do that would do anything for them. A while back, I said I wasn't going to scold the Trump voters anymore. People make mistakes. People believe big lies. Shit happens. But we also started off this podcast reminding the Trump voters they own this shit. Rain or shine, this is all them. But as we watch a White House that seems less coordinated than a frat house, a president who potentially fed information to the Russians without understanding why that might be an issue, and then doubled down on his authority to do so, as we have a potential RICO-esque case forming around the top of the Republican Party, I couldn't help but revisit that fucking question. How could you have voted for this fucking idiot? And I had a revelation. Well, it wasn't really a revelation. You fuckers put it right out there with every post that includes the word libtard, with every Hillary for Prison 2016 bumper sticker, for every neo-Nazi post about sending those people back where they belong. I kept hearing about how you voted for Trump because he says what he thinks, except he doesn't fucking think. What it really means is that he got away with saying all the things you wanted in your little black fucking hearts to say. Like Jeremy Joseph Christian, the white American who verbally assaulted a woman for wearing a hijab and being a foreigner, then stabbed 3 people who intervened. Trump made it okay to do the awful shit you wanted to do, like Greg Gianforte choke-slamming a reporter who wouldn't shut up. You voted for the outsider to stick it to Hillary, or the liberals, or the Democrats, or the queers, or the niggers, or the Muslims, or the welfare moms, or the immigrants who somehow are simultaneously stealing your jobs and all the welfare. Whoever the fuck wasn't you that you blamed for your goddamn position in life. You hated other people more than you cared about your fucking country. You couldn't vote Democrat because they're all crooked, or commies, or whatever stupid fucking thing Fox told you, even though the Democrats are the party that traditionally supports the working class. For fuck's sake, Obama wasn't hustling to get fucking medical coverage for people in Trump's tax bracket. He was trying to get you coverage. But you voted for Donald fucking Trump. If he hasn't blown up the world yet, he sure nuked the political one. Electing Trump president has destroyed the credibility of the electoral process. It's destroyed the credibility of the office of the President of the United States. It's probably damaged, if not destroyed, international relations for decades to come, not to mention just the American lives put at risk by Cittadini's policies, let alone those overseas. His cabinet full of industry tools are doing as much damage as possible to every policy that protects us, our children, and their children. But you got to stick it to those fucking liberals, so there's that. Here's the difference between us, and it's why we're really angry. It's not because we're whiners or snowflakes or whatever other dismissive thing you use to describe liberals while being those very things yourselves. It's because even those of us who had misgivings about Hillary, including some hardcore Sandernistas like AJ, took a look at the race, saw the two candidates, sorry Jill Wi-Fi signals and Gary What's Aleppo, you didn't have a fucking chance, and there was too much at stake. We made an assessment of what would be the least harmful action to our country, and we pulled the lever for Hillary. But you, Trump voter, you pulled the lever for Trump, and you blew it up. God damn you. God damn you all to hell.
The sleep of reason brings forth monsters.
I'm a whiner, and I keep whining and whining until I win.
Maybe somebody will rise up.
We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty.
Welcome to Swing State, an aggressive, progressive, critical, and political podcast from the middle of the Midwest. Welcome back to Swing State. This is episode 19. I'm Lewayne.
I'm AJ.
And we're probably going to talk some more about Russia. So if you don't like that, feel free to tune out, or maybe pressure representatives to get that impeachment ball rolling. Trump did his first field trip abroad, and
it went reasonably terrible. The Germans were none too impressed. Der Speigel published an article, this was back on May 19th, it was an editorial by a Mr. Klaus Brinkbaumer. They have pretty much come to the same conclusion that we came to months ago. It carries a little extra weight because it is a major European paper lambasting the President of the United States in a pretty unprecedented way. So here's a bit of it. Donald Trump is not fit to be the President of the United States. He does not possess the requisite intellect and does not understand the significance of the office he holds, nor the tasks associated with it. He doesn't read. He doesn't bother to peruse important files and intelligence reports and knows little about the issues that he has identified as his priorities. His decisions are capricious and they are delivered in the form of tyrannical decrees.
And if anybody knows anything about tyrannical decrees, it is in fact the Germans. Here's the deal. There's this popular sort of myth isn't right, but we often catch ourselves using the phrase leader of the free world when we're talking about the President of the United States, working on the assumption that America is both a noble power and led by somebody who, well, frankly knows what the fuck they're doing, but in this case, led by a power that is equally as noble as the nation. And what's basically happened is that we've sort of abdicated that by voting for Donald Trump. More than one article that I've read recently with regard to his trip to Europe has basically identified Angela Merkel as the de facto head of the free world at this point. She's sort of ostensibly the leader of the EU and, by extension, the free world, pretty much as everybody understands it, because I think part of the problem of that is the European perception that America maybe isn't part of the free world anymore.
Yeah, are certainly not capable of carrying on the mantle that has existed basically since the end of World War II. This is amazing because if you remember, Donald Trump used to go out on the campaign stump and say the following:
The world is laughing at us. They think we're stupid.
The article I was reading from continues, the U.S. elected a laughingstock to the presidency and has now made itself dependent on a joke of a man. The country is, as David Brooks wrote recently in the New York Times, dependent on a child. That is what our European allies really think. That is what they're thinking in their centers of power.
So for once, Trump is actually right. They are, in fact, laughing at us because he's a fucking idiot.
Others have said that the Russians are laughing. I'm sure that they are in a way, but the problem that the Russians have is, I don't remember who made the analogy, but they're kind of like the burglars who came to rob the safe and then blew up the fucking safe. because I think that they thought they were going to get something out of their relationship with Donald Trump and, as we'll talk about later, their relationship with Jared Kushner and other top-ranking officials in the White House. But they really, really, really have painted themselves now into a corner because they've been exposed. And the worse that this gets, the more terrible our response is going to have to be diplomatically, politically, economically, etc. So, yeah, Donald Trump, he thought we were a laughingstock. Well, congratulations, Trump voter. You have officially turned us into one.
Hooray!
Yeah, great.
Well, so much so that there's virtually no positive stories coming out of Europe with regard to Trump's visit because nobody can take him seriously. I don't know how many times I've seen a clip of him shoving his way through a bunch of other foreign leaders in order to be in front of the fucking picture. And then on top of that, this delightful little clip that AJ showed me with regard to Macron and his greeting to Trump.
We'll link you to it, but yeah, it's unfortunate we're not a visual medium because this is just amazing. If you maybe just a theater of the mind for a moment, if you can just imagine, Macron is walking towards a group of leaders, including Angela Merkel and Donald Trump. He walks deliberately towards Donald Trump and almost kind of extends his hand, and then right as he gets there, he pivots away from Donald Trump and veers way off to the right and greets Angela Merkel first, sort of signifying her importance in the lineup. And I'm sure Trump, having seen that, was just livid. I imagine later on he probably exploded.
And let's be honest, aside from disrespecting him outright, he went to Merkel. The woman.
The woman. Oh my God, Donald's balls probably retracted into his abdomen when that happened.
Here's the thing about Merkel versus Trump. The important part, and the part that all of Donald's money will never get him, people respect her. There's a reason why, again, people begun referring to her as the leader of the free world. Because they respect her. They respect her intellect. They respect her political acumen. They respect her as a human being. And Trump can't buy that. And that's where he's really going to come up short pretty much everywhere, and why, as I said before, he's pretty much ruined the credibility of the presidency of the United States.
Well, and we can also throw into that the functional operation of the presidency has been a complete disaster. A disaster. Since the beginning. He cannot fill staff. He's losing staff. He lost his national security advisor, the shortest serving ever in the history of the position. And now today we learn that Michael Dubke, the White House communications director, is also going to resign. He decided he was going to stay on through the foreign trip, but then he's hitting the eject button. The way that the Washington Post and Politico and the New York Times and CNN, the way that they're able to source some of their stories with 30 people within the White House, that, to me, speaks of an environment where anybody in that room is willing to sell out anyone else at any time and would be looking for the escape button the second that they think they've got a good one to get the fuck out of there.
If you're the captain of a fucking ship and everybody's jumping overboard, that probably says something about your quality of leadership right there.
Right.
I don't know how, Jesus Christ, help me out here with Trump voters. How the fuck do you look at this guy and still think, oh yeah, that's totally the guy?
Yeah, it's just the liberal media that's making up all this Russia nonsense, and they're the ones that are causing this to happen. What are you talking about? The investigation, we learned, was going on for months before he got elected.
And let's be honest, the liberal media that the Trump voters still bitch about,
that doesn't exist. We need to keep saying that, by the way.
It's not just, quote, the liberal media. It's literally all of the media, all over the globe. This guy's got more bad ink than anyone even considered for W.
He's the most unpopular president at this point of any of them going back to World War II.
So basically living memory.
There is an effort being made to sort of pretend that this is someone else's fault. That there's someone else out there that's the real reason this is happening, and one day this is just going to all blow over and everything's going to be fine. We'll get our tax cuts and et cetera and so forth. That's not going to happen. And I don't know what it's going to take for some people to wake up and figure out what is going on here. We'll get to it in our next segment, but another giant bombshell, an atom bomb for any administration, went off saying that the key member of Trump's administration, Jared Kushner, was trying to seek a secret back channel to Russia directly.
The guy who is, for all intents and purposes, functionally the president of the United States. The guy who's doing all of Trump's light work and heavy work, and all of his work tried to do a back-channel deal with fucking Russia.
Yeah, when he's not solving the conflicts in the Middle East, he's solving the opioid crisis. I mean, this guy, holy shit, he's like Superman, only better. But for some reason, before his father-in-law was even sworn into office, he figured somewhere in his head, right, that he was going to figure out how to talk to Moscow without anyone knowing, and then he, or someone, came up with the idea of using Russian surveillance equipment to do it. So he was actually going to go into a Russian skiff, that's where you can send and receive classified information. He thought that would be the way to do it. A story like that, if it came out about anybody else, it would just be the end. But in Trump land, for some reason, it's like there's so many of these that drop that at some point you're just sort of numb to it, which is maybe even a part of the strategy. But holy shit.
That assumes a strategy. But yeah, again, and I know we've mentioned this specifically before, if there had even been a suggestion that Hillary or Obama had tried to even attempt communication with Russia through an improper channel, we wouldn't hear the fucking end of it. Fox News would have that shit on 24-hour rotation, beating that fucking drum.
The right-wing media would probably have us right at the point of civil war if it were going on like that. I mean, you imagine Hillary Clinton fires the FBI director that's investigating her ties to Russia. Then we find out that Chelsea Clinton decided to go ahead and set up a back channel to Moscow during the transition so that she could escape NSA surveillance and talk directly to the Kremlin, who they're being investigated for colluding with and stealing the election. Just put Hillary Clinton at the front of that instead of Donald Trump. And the entire media landscape is set on fire in this country because of how the right-wing media works.
Some guy went into a fucking pizza joint armed, ready to rescue children because somebody told him Hillary Clinton was running children out of the basement of this fucking place. Somebody believed it and acted on it. Now tell me how that would scale up if we were talking about international relations and back-channel deals with fucking Russia, which has been the bad guy right up until the point Trump took office.
Oh man, there's some history there that would get the old timers really rocking. Remember, Fox News, this is the crowd that they're selling gold and like home survival kits in case the apocalypse comes. I mean, like that's their advertising product because that's kind of their message. The two go hand in hand. It's astounding. It's just astounding that we even have to have the conversation about whether or not this is real enough to be concerned with about 35% of the population.
It's not a secret. Trump just says whatever the fuck he feels like saying. Whether it makes sense or not, whether he can back it up with anything or not, whatever. He just says it, and people believe it. A certain segment of the right wing just take it as read that is in fact what's going on. Even though it has been pointed out to them on countless occasions, not only is this factually wrong, it's wrong in a logical sense, and frankly doesn't make any sense for a president to say shit like this. And yet, there it is.
There is one exception, of course, to this, and that is the followers of Trump will not be able to do this on the Jared Kushner news because so far the only response out of the White House, we're not going to talk about Jared. That's the only thing they've said, other than it's fake news.
So they finally remembered their mafia lessons. Shut the fuck up.
Right, there you go. Maybe somebody from the Russian syndicate there got a hold of him on the phone and said, hey, put a clamp on it, or we release the P-tape, I don't know. You want golden showers on radio and television from sea to shining sea, comrade? Keep talking big fucking mouth.
Can't get enough Swing State in your life? Follow us on Twitter at swingstate_show. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/swingstateshow. Check out back episodes, our blog, and whatever other things don't fit on the podcast at swingstateshow.wordpress.com. That includes links to past episodes and individual broadsides on YouTube. If you want to send us love notes or hate mail, shoot it to swingstateshow@gmail.com. Thanks to all of you who listen, share, and comment. We really appreciate it. Now, back to the show.
If you don't know who Jared Kushner is, he is the kind of do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none bullshit artist at the White House.
He's Trump's son-in-law, and he basically is doing Trump's job.
Yeah, Trump only ever had Patrick Bateman's for children, so I guess he trusts Jared a little more. But here is from the New York Times. Investigation turns to Kushner's motives in a meeting with Putin ally. That is from May 29th. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, was looking for a direct line to President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia. A search that in mid-December found him in a room with a Russian banker whose financial institution was deeply intertwined with Russian intelligence and remains under sanction by the United States. Federal congressional investigators are now examining what exactly Mr. Kushner and the Russian banker, Sergei N. Gorkov, wanted from each other. The banker is a close associate of Mr. Putin, but he has not been known to play a diplomatic role for the Russian leader. That has raised questions about why he was meeting with Mr. Kushner at a crucial moment in the presidential transition, according to current and former officials familiar with the investigations.
Well, I would guess that if the Russian has not normally held a diplomatic position and Kushner was involved, that it's probably about money and access. That seems the most likely thing. Either one of them is going to give the other one money and vice versa, and one of them is getting access and vice versa. Realistically, I would guess the Russian's getting access to the guy who's going to be running the country. Maybe there's some innocent way, because I'm not a businessman with decades of experience in business and stuff, but I'm not sure what the less cynical view of those two getting together would be. Help me out there on that one. I got nothing.
No, it's unthinkable that a private citizen with no diplomatic background, let alone any major influence within Russia, he has had no major post as an American diplomat within Russia.
He's just this guy.
Yeah, he's just some guy who happens to be related to Trump. And the story that right now they're telling is that he got it into his head to open up this back channel, or did Trump tell him to? I don't even know, because they haven't answered the questions. They're just dodging the question, so we don't even know what the genesis of this idiocy was, much less what made him think that going to Russian intelligence and saying, hey, we need to talk privately. Why would you think that A, that was a good idea, or B, that it had any possibility of turning out well for you?
Or C, that nobody'd fucking notice. Right now, being part of the White House, you are one of the most scrutinized people on the planet.
You're famous. Your face is all over magazines. If you show up at the Russian embassy to go and use their skiff, the FBI is going to know.
You know, there's an FBI guy watching the fucking place right now going, is it fucking Jared Kushner? Did he just, because everybody knows who he is now. I never heard of him. I had no idea who the fuck Jared Kushner was until Trump was campaigning. I had no idea. And there's literally no reason why I should ever have heard his name, were it not for that. Now, I've got to worry that this fucking Patrick Bateman-looking motherfucker is in league with the goddamn Russians.
And we don't know why. That's the thing right now. Whatever the speculation is, you honestly don't know the extent of the relationship at this point. Because remember, when the Steele dossier came out, what was one of the major things that it claimed within its pages? It was that the Russians had leverage over Donald Trump and presumably the people around him. So who even the fuck knows if this was Jared Kushner's decision? I can't claim that as a fact. I know that it happened, but I don't know if it was because Trump told him, he thought of it himself, somebody else told him, or maybe Vladimir Putin told him. It could be any one of those.
Maybe Uncle Vladdy just wanted a way to get in touch with him.
Put a pin in Jared Kushner for a second. Another piece of news came out, courtesy of ABC. One of President Donald Trump's closest confidants, his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, has now become a focus of the expanding congressional investigation into Russian efforts to influence the 2016 campaign. You know, kind of like how Don Corleone had, Tom Hagen, the lawyer? Kind of like that. Cohen confirmed to ABC News that House and Senate investigators have asked him, quote, to provide information and testimony about any contacts he had with people connected to the Russian government, but he said he has turned down the invitation. Quote, I declined the invitation to participate as the request was poorly phrased, overly broad, and not capable of being answered, he told ABC News in an email Tuesday. That's one way to go, put it that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, what the fuck are you doing with the Russians is probably a little vague, sure.
So your House counsel is now being investigated by the FBI. Your son-in-law tried to open up a secret private channel to Russia without the knowledge of our own intelligence community. Donald Trump himself was on stage asking Russia to hack or find the emails for Hillary Clinton. I mean, just remember, all of this is what we call like a pattern of evidence. It's not just the one thing. Why do I think the Russia scandal is probably going to be the biggest scandal of our lifetimes? Because of the pattern of evidence. You have too many people not giving the right answers, which, by the way, we said this months ago it had to have been. What is the right answer if the FBI comes knocking at the White House and says that they think somebody is colluded with a foreign hostile power in your house? Come right in, sir. Here are all of our documents. Here are all of our people. You can question any of them extensively. We will absolutely turn over anything. You have access to everything. I want to get to the bottom of this as much as you do, sir. Thank you for coming, sir. Nothing would make me happier than a quick resolution to this matter so we can move on to the business of government, ... It doesn't make any sense. Let me rephrase that. It doesn't make any sense unless you include one assumption, and that's that Donald Trump is somehow mobbed up or connected with the Russians in ways that go deeper than that are currently known by the mainstream media. If you add that little assumption, and suddenly it's like, oh, everyone's behavior makes total sense.
Obviously, there's the cooperation angle. The alternative, of course, is the I'm not saying shit. You know, just keep your fucking mouth shut, get your lawyer, blah, blah, blah. Or you do like Flynn and plead the fifth and basically say, yeah, I'm not telling shit because of self-incrimination, which, of course, as Donald has reminded us, is pretty much a sign of guilt as far as he's concerned.
Here's people taking the Fifth Amendment. Like you see on the mob, right? You see the mob takes the Fifth. If you're innocent, why are you taking the Fifth Amendment?
You mentioned earlier that this is probably the biggest scandal of our life. And I would probably have to agree with you because I was kind of looking back at shit that I've already lived through. Because way back when I was virtually non-existent, we had the Watergate business, okay? Now, brought down a president, one, he was smart enough to get the fuck out while he still could. But brought down a president, we're talking about a handful of people involved. And it was basically shady shit for re-elections, okay? Not the biggest criminal activity in the world. I mean, there's a burglary and there's some sabotage and shit like that. I'm not dismissing it. But it's, again, a handful of people, creep the organization for me to re-elect the president, and Nixon himself, who was aware of things. Okay, fine. Sure, that's terrible. And then you look at fucking Iran-Contra, okay? Reagan walked away from that pretty much unscathed. I mean, there's a reason why he was joking, referred to as the Teflon president. Shit would not stick to him. Okay, fine, great, whatever. And then you have H.W., who basically wasn't around long enough to really do shit. I mean, the Iraq War, Mark I. And then Clinton. Scandal everywhere, constantly. Couldn't stop hearing about all the fucking scandal. They didn't amount to shit. I mean, at the end of the day, he was basically brought up on blowjob charges, for fuck's sake. And W, okay, I personally think that Iraq and Afghanistan, all of that, is worthy of discussion as a significant scandal. But the fucking scale of what we're talking about with Trump. I mean, there have been jokes that if you take everybody out within the Republican Party who is in some way connected with this, we're going to end up with President Orrin fucking Hatch, because it has to go that far down and that fucking deep. Now, I know that's sort of an exaggeration, and it's to some degree sort of a joke, because not everybody's getting swept up all at the same time. But this is not just a handful of people within a party. We're talking about major scale corruption of a party.
Well, and that's what we talked about last week with the financial aspect of this, which is probably the least understood at this point, or one of the least understood aspects of the scandal, is what exactly were the financial transactions between the Russian banks and American citizens, and perhaps the Republican Party, and the nature of all of those. You know, were they innocent? Were they not? We're going to find out. But it's kind of like what that one character said, you know, in The Wire, the famous line.
You follow drugs, you get drug addicts and drug dealers. But you start to follow the money, and you don't know where the fuck it's going to take you.
And that's kind of where we're sitting right now. I mean, for the purposes of this show, I am pretty hesitant to report much of what I hear in rumor land that I can't confirm through mainstream press. What I can tell you is that in the further reaches of rumor land, there are people who appear to have pretty solid connections with the intelligence community who think that a lot of folks are going to go down. And they're pretty damn confident of it. You can take that for what it's worth. I don't recommend believing anything. I recommend researching and then, of course, waiting for the full disclosure of the investigations.
But at the end of the day, if a massive swath of Republicans is brought down by this, none of us will be surprised.
Except Republicans, which brings us back to our conversation earlier, which is if this were Hillary Clinton and her attorney was not participating, if her short-lived national security advisor decided to take the Fifth Amendment and not give documents to the Senate, what would the reaction be? What would the scandal appear like in the Fox News graphics? Old people would die of fright from the sound effects they would have to create just to make the new breaking news alerts.
Well, yeah, because first of all, the assumption would be that she's guilty. But then the speculation would begin. The unfounded speculation would begin, and they would be firing off shit left and right, everywhere. We generally, I mean, AJ and I, obviously, we sort of engage in a little hyperbole, and we probably should use the word allegedly more often than we do. But the fact remains, most of the time when we're talking about shit on here, we're talking about shit that we can verify as well as we can, given the limited resources available within the media, because we feel a responsibility to be as accurate as is possible for us. There is an entire media structure that is based solely on not giving a fuck about any of that. And it is not coincidental. It happens to be the side most closely associated with the Republican Party.
And if you think that that's hyperbole, please recall that Donald Trump rose to prominence in the terms of presidential aspirations by pushing the birther conspiracy on Fox News Channel every fucking day. As many times as he could get on to pump more bullshit about that racist conspiracy theory, they would have him on again.
Because he's a good show. That's ultimately what we're talking about. Speaking of Nixon earlier, there's sort of been this discussion that's taken as a given that the transition in how debates are handled pretty much shifted with the Kennedy-Nixon debates because they were televised. So you got this good-looking guy with his Northeastern accent, and you got Nixon who's sweaty and has a 5 o'clock shadow even if he just shaved and looks guilty of something, and there's sort of this transition. Now, in this particular case, it happened to be the Democrat who sort of dominated that because there still remains disagreement. People who listened to that debate have one position. People who saw it have a different position. But the right has taken that sort of model and really worked it. It has become about show and spectacle all the time, and it doesn't matter if there are facts.
If I could just give you an example of this, like one concrete example of the evolution of that media savvy, Roger Ailes actually goes back to that moment. So when we're talking about the telling Nixon to mop his upper lip and to do the radio and TV interviews a certain way and how to look, how to take breaks, where to put the cameras, all of those little subtle arts of, maybe you could even say the dark arts of infotainment newsmaking. That all began way back with Nixon and Kennedy, but then Roger Ailes really perfected it over the years to the point where one day I tuned into Fox News to get a breaking news alert, and they literally showed a picture of a fucking fern behind a microphone while we were waiting for somebody who never showed up. John Boehner was supposed to give a press conference. Breaking news alert, it's a fern. This is what we're talking about, Fox News.
This is ultimately why I think This is something we don't really talk about a lot. I mean, we talk about all the various reasons why Trump reached where he did. But look at the people he was running against within the Republican Party, the 15, 16, whatever.
Yeah,
the fucking
16
candidates.
total candidates.
Right. But look at them, and you can eliminate several of them right off the bat. Let's be honest. Ben Carson's not going to go anywhere with the Republican Party. He's just not. Carly, no. Why? Because you're wearing a skirt. You don't have a penis. You're not getting the job. That leaves guys like Rubio, who's got kind of a funny name, and we're not really sure where he's from. Cruz, who has an even funnier name, and we know where he's from. He's from fucking Canada via Cuba. So, no, he's not going to do it. And you just work your way down the list.
The funny thing is, though, is that a lot of the ones that had to bail out fastest were the ones that theoretically should have had the best chance based on experience.
Right.
But in the Republican media world today, as I think he's maybe coming around to saying,
based on experience, that is the phrase. Based on experience, there were even fucking Chris Christie. Chris Christie's probably one of the more experienced people within that batch. And certainly within Trump's initial transition team, Christie was the guy with the most experience. Christie doesn't look good on camera. He's out of luck. And that's the thing. Trump has spent most of his career ultimately sort of culminating in The Apprentice, but ultimately being...
Okay, we had unexpected hindrances to recording this episode. The end result is that we had to cut off the show without wrapping it up. So we'll get everything straightened out and be ready for the next episode. Thanks for your patience, and until next time, organize, mobilize, protest, vote.